We're going to have to start this process because we do not want to run late. Or as late as we are probably going to be running. We don't want to run into the other sections. So with that, I'm just going to actually ask, and Mark, I'm going to hold you to that. No need to read full biographies. On the other hand, I do have to mention that we have Mark Temnycky, who's a senior fellow over at the Atlantic Council. We have Dr. Romanenko, Oleksandr Romanko, who's with us. Eugene Roman will be joining us by principal of Design.AI. Will be joining us by Zoom. And in the place of Dr. Yurij Wowczuk, his very competent brother, who is also a senior member of the Civilian Military Innovation Institute and knows basically as much as his brother does, though I'm sure that the brothers debate about it. And so with that, Mark, I'm going to turn this over because this is this is where it really gets meat and potatoes. It's the aerospace to cyberspace. That area is something that the Ukrainians seem to be really excelling in. And so this one's going to be a panel that everybody wants to listen to. Okay? And everybody's watching.
Доброго дня всім. Hello, thank you. Good afternoon for coming. My name is Mark Temnycky, or Marko Temnycky po-naszemu. I am a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, as well as a senior geopolitics contributor at Forbes. A few house matters before we begin. We are currently supposed to end at 1:55, so in interest of time, we will try to, and respectful for the other panels, we'll try to go through that. As Dr. Zaryckyj was saying, that this panel is about aerospace and cyber, and this is very important to Ukraine in terms of defense and its ability to contribute to the world, because when the full-scale invasion began in 2022, there was a lot of criticism from countries around the world about Ukraine as asking for all this assistance, but what can the Ukrainians provide to the rest of the world? And what has happened over the last 4 years is Ukraine has come up with a state-of-the-art drone capability, which our dear distinguished guests will talk about a little bit later, as well as in the cyber realm, where Ukraine is now being invited to participate in NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence as a non-NATO member, which is very significant. And as of this calendar year, 2026, there have been instances in Europe and the Middle East where countries are asking for Ukrainian drone capabilities and technology. So now the narrative is flipping, where it's no longer Ukraine is asking the world and seen as a country that is asking for assistance, but rather it is working for the ability of what kind of defense and cyber capabilities can give back. And we have three great panelists here. So we have first Dr. Oleksandr Romanko, who is the Associate Director of Financial Risk Quantitative Research at SS&C Technologies. He is also an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto and distinguished visiting professor. Thank you for joining us. We also have in person Mr. Yurij Wowczuk, who is here, as Dr. Zaryckyj said, helping with his brother here. And he is involved as the director of the Volk Foundation, as well as director of research. And then finally, online here in Zoom, we have Pan Eugene Roman, who is the principal of Design.AI. And he's also distinguished senior fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs. So we have three great distinguished panelists here to talk about the subject. And I now pass over to Dr. Romanko to talk about these subjects. And a quick reminder, the presentations are 12 to 14 minutes. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll time it out. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Walter, for inviting me. So I'll just start my my timer, just in case. Always helps. So my name is Oleksandr Romanko. I am really glad to join all of you, and especially the team of Ukrainian Canadians that we are having here. Eugene Roman joining us online, and Roman Wowczuk, and later on we'll have Krista Freeland. And of course, as being a Canadian Ukrainian, I would like to get a spoon of maple syrup to the clam chowder and to borscht. And that's basically my goal. So I am, in addition to my academic roles and the role in the industry, I am on the board of directors of Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, UCC. So in Canada, we like it short. So here you have UCCA. Over there, we have UCC. It's too cold to pronounce longer words in Canada. I came to Canada actually 20 years ago from Ukraine to do my PhD in what we now call AI. And since then, I was working both in the industry and being a adjunct professor in the AI field. Basically, being in the corporate sector, I was with IBM for 8 years, now with NC Technologies. I was able to follow how AI develops, and that will be my first pretty much part of my remarks about what do we mean by artificial intelligence. And of course, later on, we'll talk about Ukraine really becoming the modern Sparta of innovations in defense. That's how I would like to call it. And that's maybe some of you who are writing your pieces in the media, like Forbes, you may be able to promote, not that necessarily it's called Sparta of defense innovations, but in general, Ukraine is really becoming the hub for defense innovations, including AI, including unmanned systems, and many, many other technologies. So, the other day I was talking to our Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada, Anita Anand, about signing a framework agreement with Ukraine within Canada's defense industrial strategy. Canada just renewed the defense industrial strategy. It's $1 trillion investment over 10 years. And of course, part of that are partnerships. And I was telling her, so if they basically listened to us in the diaspora 2 years ago about partnering with Ukraine, right now we'll be jointly supplying interceptor drones, Canada and Ukraine, to the Middle East. Of course, we don't necessarily believe in fairy tales and it didn't happen, but that's basically our message to the government of Canada in our case, is that we are no longer supporting Ukraine because of shared values, sympathy. Now it's our national interest to partner with Ukraine on defense technologies, to protect our sovereignty, in the case of Canada, in our Canadian Arctic, to basically countermeasure Russian and Chinese threats. Basically, let me briefly talk what do I mean by artificial intelligence. Those are the algorithms that help us to make decisions. That's basically what it is. There are basically two major areas of success of AI right now, computer vision and natural language processing, including generative AI, large language models. That's the first pillar. And second, basically modeling uncertainty. That's really what we are trying to target. Are we able to make strategic decisions with the help of AI? So far, not really. So far, we are really good at making tactical decisions. If we just project it into the war in Iran, so now you can build a wonderful network graph model to basically follow Ayatollah. Here we know that the driver of Ayatollah is here, the car of Ayatollah is here, the dog of the Ayatollah. I'm not sure if Ayatollah has a dog, had a dog, but in any case. And we can build a probabilistic model saying that with 99% probability, Ayatollah is now at this place. And after it's so easy to push the button, which is, so AI is really good at making this technical decision. Unfortunately, it's not good yet, at least in making strategic decisions. And that's basically one of the problems these days. But coming back to Ukraine, so 3 pillars of AI and defense tech: education and human capital. Basically, education. These days, at least in the last 6 months, I didn't write a single line of code. It's all done by Claude Code or any other favorite large language model. So this is something different. Probably the biggest advantage of generative artificial intelligence is not necessarily being able to write text or generate images, but really being able to generate code that helps us to do any sort of modeling that we need to do. Doesn't matter if it's computer vision or it's uncertainty modeling. So as a result, Ukraine is taking advantage of that as well in aerospace, in AI, in unmanned vehicles. So Ukraine has a great human capital. Universities there are wonderful. So I'm having the privileges of teaching at American University Kyiv and Ukrainian Catholic University, and in the past at Kyiv School of Economics. So talent is there. Right now, universities over there are establishing the technological parks. And that's what we're trying to engage with them as well. So, for instance, I'm working with a 3rd Rifle Assault Brigade in Ukraine. And what we are doing with them, we are trying to do the reverse engineering of the downed Russian assets, such as Shahed drones. really the electronics of the Shahed drone or any other drone is changing every 2 to 3 months. So if you basically learn and did reverse engineering 6 months ago, it doesn't tell you really much about. The progress is so fast, so pretty much everything is outdated in 2 to 3 months right now. And that's what we are trying to do now. We want these R&D labs, reverse engineering labs, to be funded by the government of Canada, governments of United States, other allies, and be established in Ukraine. And Ukraine basically sharing that information with us, with the allies. Ukraine is now changing its legislation, so where now the Verkhovna Rada is working on the Science City program that is making these academic collaborations much easier. Second pillar is the business ecosystem around AI and defense tech. So Ukrainian military units, brigades, they have R&D divisions on the front lines. That's something new that didn't exist a couple of years ago. And again, they're developing their own tech on the front lines and testing it immediately. Of course, there are a number of private and public companies in Ukraine that are developing the tech, but the feedback loop is really short. It's basically a month or even a couple of weeks. Like in Canada, the feedback loop is 6 months. So, and because all the tech is battlefield tested, that's an advantage. And it doesn't make sense, for instance, for us in Canada to really produce millions of drones, because those are going to be outdated in 3 months. Well, it makes sense to partner with Ukraine on the R&D and after have a license. So if Canada needs 1 million drones on a short notice, we can use that license. But if you basically, you're just not picking up anymore for 5 minutes, nice. Second, what we now know about the front lines and being in the interaction with the soldiers there is really nice because you learn. So even if it's not related to the technology, so this winter we were supplying the toe and hand warmers to the front lines, and you learn that deliveries is no longer happening by vehicles. Those are either happening by the drones, so basically drop the supplies from the drones. In that case, the smaller the weight, the better, or they deliver those with unmanned ground robots. So, and that's basically you another understanding. That was not there a year ago. Now it's there because of the kill zone. So kill zone is there, as we know, 10 to 20 kilometer zone on both sides where everything moving is going to be targeted. And sooner or later, it's going to be targeted by AI-enabled drones and ground vehicles. That's a gray and a danger zone. That's why we can talk about the moral aspects. So far, it's pretty much what is working is the autopilot. The drone pilot points to a target at a distance typically up to 1 kilometer, and it autonomously flies and hit the targets. But sooner or later, drones will patrol the skies, identify targets, prioritize those automatically, and probably target anything that is moving. Of course, in the kill zone, when there are no civilians, that's probably an easier problem from the moral standpoint. But in general, that's a problem that we need to decide. And you have seen the scandal between Pentagon and Anthropic on these types of issues. So something to keep in mind. And my last pillar is really AI in defense. And here we are mostly talking about a couple of technologies. So first, everything related to unmanned systems, both aerial systems, sea drones, ground robotic systems. As I said, those are getting more and more autonomous. And even by now, on a cheap FPV drone, so I'm working with the ecosystem of Yaroslav Ozhenuk, the founder of PetCube, and now he has 2 defense startups. So basically, we already put in the AI tech on the FPV drone. So the FPV drone, $500. You put the controller and the software another $100 to the price, and they have this autopilot, the last mile kamikaze drones. So for the larger drones, it's getting even more advanced. And another is really those simulation modeling systems that we call war games, where you can simulate any battlefield operation, logistic operation. You can basically make decisions, of course, in the face of uncertainty. Those are very, very difficult statistical machine learning AI problems, but we are getting there. Ukraine has information for that, the Delta system, which is a situational awareness system. And now Ukraine actually released recently for its allies millions of images from the battlefield on which we can make our AI algorithms to learn using machine learning. And I would like to leave it probably with the following message. A month ago, Ukraine established the defense center called A1. In Ukraine, everything is called one, Brave One, A1. So it's under the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. So we are having a conversation with them next week. But that's basically a great partnership opportunity. So this AI Defense Center in Ukraine is something that we should advocate for funding, collaborating, using their data, and eventually making our countries, US, Canada, other allies, aware, and most importantly, invest in those technologies. Otherwise, we will be, sorry to call it losers, to such countries as Iran. And that's the pace of innovation is so fast that without partnering with Ukraine right now, we are losing. So let's advocate for funding from our countries. Let's advocate for investments. Let's advocate for partnerships. And let's advocate for Ukraine to really continue to be the Sparta of defense innovations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pan Roman, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to just summarize some thoughts for you today. I'm going to start with a quote from Frederick Engels. Back a long time ago, he said, "An ounce of action is worth a ton of theory." The Ukrainian tech sector, which I've been involved with now for over 20 years, has evolved dramatically. The war has changed that dynamic, but let's start with a society, a technologically rooted society. A lot of it comes from the polytechnic facilities, the universities in the country. When I first started working with technology companies in Ukraine, it was bumpy. I heard a lot about startups, startup, as they said, a lot about outsourcing, and about the immaturity of that sector. That sector has evolved and matured very much. I've worked with a number of Ukrainian companies. The largest IT company in Ukraine is run from Philadelphia, EPAM. I'm on the board of EPAM, but there are others. There's SoftServe. There's NIX. These are global corporations that have joined the global village, the tech sector. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Ukraine has an abundance of technical capability. It's an advantage. The war has sharpened that advantage. The lessons learned in the last 4 to 5 years are about doing a lot with a little. And in this world of AI technology, confusion, because there's a lot of confusion, it's the smog of confusion, Ukrainians have an advantage. And the advantage is being able to figure it out under very unpredictable conditions. And if we ask the question about what is the AI sector all about, it's a world of unpredictability and confusion. Now, the advantages that the Ukrainian sector has, the solution engineering quality coming out of the country is bar none the best in the world. The world may not know it, but that's the reality. Cybersecurity expertise has evolved, one, because of the threat. It's interesting when people are under threat, they'll do what it takes. And Ukrainians have done what it takes, not just to survive, but to defend and to move forward. And so in this world of unpredictability, I think the next 4, 5, 6, 10 years, I would say that the Ukrainian tech sector in the global village is about maximizing the potential. And I think there is tremendous opportunity. Obviously, the war needs to end. But the maturity of the companies that are there, the new graduates who are coming out from the systems, from the educational systems, but also from the experience. Heavily female-oriented, by the way, which is a good thing in the tech sector, is an advantage. So the closing thought is, in a world of smart machines, Ukraine has an advantage that we can take forward. Companies such as Ring, Grammarly are Ukrainian-oriented, came from Ukraine. There'll be more, and I think we as the diaspora, members of diaspora, who are, I'll call it the sons and daughters of Ukraine. I was born in Canada. Я говорю по-українськи, я би сказав, досить добре. And I've been involved helping what I would call my fatherland, where my father and mother came from. And that goes deep. And that deep desire to make a difference, whether it's helping in terms of education, helping in terms of what I know or don't know. By the way, not knowing is as important as knowing in this world. And I think the skills that Ukrainians bring to the table is about leadership in this AI world. And I think simple examples. Dr. Romanko mentioned Delta. There's DIA, and there are many other examples of platforms that have been put in place that other countries should take advantage of. And I think we'll move that forward. So we have a search of excellence going on. We are searching for IT excellence, and I think having withstood the horrors of war, the Ukrainians are hardened and ready to move forward as time moves forward. Дякую.
Дякую вам. Pan Yuri, over to you, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Walter, thank you. From the foundation, we really value the relationship we have with CUSUR. And I always take the opportunity to advertise the effectiveness and I think the utility of these discussions. And I do feel they have a significant impact on policy and on people's overall perspective of what needs to be done between now and when the war is over, and then into the reconstruction phase. So as Marco mentioned, I plan to be an active listener today, not a participant, but I got a signal text from my brother as I was boarding the plane that I'm going to take his place. So we had not talked about discussion or what perspective to take in that way, but we're pretty much aligned. I'm just an older, grayer, less attractive version of him. So I'll do my best to relate some thoughts. So my perspective on this subject is really from an innovation side of things, and so our business works with the warfighter in dynamic environments to characterize and cultivate and ultimately transition technologies to meet warfighters' needs, where there's gaps, where there's process deficiencies, where there's, basically in a lot of cases, just the absence of enabling technology that, improves or addresses lethality questions. And the Department of War is interested, kind of singularly at the moment in lethality. So that's kind of the corpus of our work. If I apply that to what we've done in Ukraine in terms of advising and helping primarily small startups and small businesses, I get an opportunity to sort of see their innovation patterns and their approach to innovation. And so it's great to see and witness the implementation of tech. It's very interesting to think about innovation frameworks. But what I find interesting and compelling and particularly successful in Ukraine is creating the environment and the conditions for successful innovation. And I'll talk about those in a minute. But I was reading yesterday, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to see it, but Mitch McConnell wrote an op-ed. I think it was published maybe in the Post. Sorry, not the Washington Times. But it was. I think the timing was right, and it basically, without getting into a political interpretation, it cultivated a call to action that we all know we need, which is to create pathways and strategic infrastructure to where not just the Department of War, but all aspects of government and all aspects of industry, quite frankly, can work strategically with Ukrainian firms without compromising technology and IP on the one end, and through a collaborative approach, optimize what that relationship can foster from an innovation perspective. And he quoted in there, as many of us may remember, about a year ago, the top two leaders of the army, so Dan Driscoll and Randy George, visited Kyiv, and their takeaway was that Ukraine is the Silicon Valley of warfare. And I think that's purposeful. It wasn't the Silicon Valley of defense tech; it was the Silicon Valley of warfare, meaning that entire array of technology and again those innovation cycles that they've worked through and have successfully implemented. And then the other sort of corollary comment was, they're doing an amazing job innovating. I think we all know that. But I think that sort of a deep dive or a double click, again, from my perspective as an innovator, working in the military civilian kind of complex, what really is driving successful innovation? And I think it's a couple of things. Dr. Romanko touched on a few of them, but I'll kind of go through my tick list for lack of a better term. So certainly battlefield pressure. We know that we've responded to that. I think a second is radical decentralization. So decentralization of procurement, but decentralization of the innovation process itself. It's not done in monolithic organizations. It's done, in the battlefield and instantaneously. Ambassador Melnyk mentioned the startup culture. And I don't know if that's appreciated enough. I mean, it's people will, equate it to what's happened in Silicon Valley, what's slowly happening in Austin and Boston and other places, but it's truly a unique form. And from the firms that I've interacted with, that cultural aspect of, quickly problem solving and transitioning and that iterative process is very prevalent. It's pretty amazing. We're here, from our experience working with the DOW and their supply chain, it's a push, it's a stretch. The tactile sort of dirty element of that is something that is not common within U.S. innovation circles, and it's very common there. I would say the integration and the universalization of hardware, software, to the extent that can exist without compromising data security, is really kind of an endemic and an exciting part of what I see as typical design platforms. There's a risk tolerance, and I love when I see startups that are trying not to perfect a prototype. We get it to a functional part, we test it, we iterate, we improve it. We don't try to deliver it perfectly spot on. And I think that's a very important one, where there is the element of risk, and the risk is informed because they're very good and very adept at gathering data from the battlefield and how it affects the warfighter. So taken together, I think that's my characterization of that innovation environment. And it's, again, from what I see as a defense contractor, it's a struggle. It shouldn't be a struggle. We even have a process called innovation in the dirt, and it's really in the dirt. I mean, it's a roll up your sleeves, hands-on approach to where the innovators work with the procurement people, work with the researchers, work with the warfighters in a contested environment, and as close to a live fire, as close to actual battle that we can get. We can call out the data that's required and the insights that are required to properly and quickly commercialize. So my sort of, in that kind of a context, I think about force threats and adaptive threats and kind of what are risks. So, kind of going forward when the fighting is finished, I won't say the war, the fighting, we know the Russian Empire will never change their tactics and will never change their approach. And if I think about sort of the laundry list of risks that are in place now and will continue, there's a number of them, right? But there's sort of three that come to mind. One is the propaganda campaign will certainly continue. The sophisticated IT that's behind the propaganda campaign is as compelling as the false messaging that's being sent, and that'll continue. And I think that'll expand. So it's a massive threat. Needless to say, the various levels of cybersecurity issues, cyber threats, the imposition of cyber, black cyber, as I'll call it, that will certainly escalate, and I think that we'll have continued pockets of acute terrorism. We'll have targeting all those things that have been happening will happen, but on a more sophisticated basis with more information. So if we look at the future threat, the application of, first of all, these technologies from a dual use perspective, as well as understanding how they need to evolve into sort of a new world where maybe there isn't active combat, these threats exist. So without taking away and maybe even setting the stage a little bit for the next panel, we see just an incredible array, right? There are so many verticals of technology that the Ukrainians have distinguished themselves in, and we could tick them all off. But there are an amazing amount of sort of evolving technology areas that are just barely being discovered. Things like asymmetric warfare, things like advanced counter UAS, EW, certainly AI and the AI application base, cyber physical systems, just to name a few, where the innovation and the technological life cycle is far advanced in Ukraine as it is in certain areas in the United States. So I kind of will end my comments in saying that we need to learn from that. These innovation cycles are they exist, they can be leveraged, and I think certainly from a policy perspective that needs to be considered.
Super, дякую. And we are just touching the surface of all these very interesting matters that are happening. But as Dr. Romanko talked about, Ukraine has a lot of innovation and drive with AI. And as Pan Roman was talking about with technological advances, and then with innovation, as you were saying, Pan Wowczuk, everything being connected in one matter. So I have very quick question for all three of you, and then we'll open to the panel because I want to be respectful of our guests. So Dr. Romanko, you had mentioned with Ukraine, there's a lot of data science and AI capabilities. What can Canada and the United States, and you mentioned it a little bit briefly, but what can they work on with the Ukrainians to better innovate and have access to those abilities, like you were saying, for example, with the ability with drones changing every 3 months, how do they stay on top of that? For Pan Roman, I would like to ask you that based on your experience with digital infrastructure and technology, what do you see as Ukraine's greatest competitive advantage in this field? And then for Pan Wowczuk, I wanted to ask you, touched a little bit about defense innovation and real world operational needs. And how do these two matters come together, especially one day the war will end, and how are the Ukrainians able to use these innovation abilities for reconstruction and other post-war matters? So thank you.
Дуже дякую. I'll briefly share my opinion about how Canada, US, and our European allies can work with Ukraine. So first, it's funding. In some cases, if you talk about the venture capital, typically private venture capital funds don't want to invest in defense or even dual use. So what we are proposing a $50 million venture capital fund from the government of Canada to invest in the Ukrainian defense tech startups that are of interest to Canada, potentially. So that's a first. Second, of course, investment. Third, other types of partnerships and collaboration. So for instance, if you talk about AI, so in that case, what Canada or US can learn from Ukraine is Ukraine has tons of the battlefield data that can be used for machine learning algorithms, for training systems, and basically stuff like that. From the other side, Canada and the US are working on something that we call wargaming, so which is simulation modeling of battlefield operations since the Second World War, while Ukraine just started working on those type of techs 4 years ago. So, and this kind of mutual exchange of ideas. For instance, we are working on a program to have Ukrainian defense scientists come into Canada for research internships, and in the opposite direction as well. So those type of things, like three things: funding, investment, and knowledge exchange. Thank you.
Either or whoever wants to go
Yeah, I can go. Sure. So I think it's a great and it's an important question, one that needs to start to be addressed. I would say I would agree with Dr. Romanko largely that those are part of the answers to the go forward. I think, as I mentioned too, is the exploitation of these technologies from a dual use perspective, even in the defense space. I mean, defense tech can typically be applied to safety and security markets in addition to defense. So right there, you've got three verticals. I've seen examples where, for example, electronic warfare technology has been applied to agriculture. So in terms of crop growth and blight mitigation and those types of things. And I think the third thing is where and it was mentioned earlier today, the destruction that's been caused to the educational system, both physically as well as psychologically, is a very big issue. So when we think about the human capital piece of this in reconstruction, so that's growing our own and also trying to compel those that left to come back. I think it's both activities, and then creating. It's not just. It's just not rote education. There needs to be thought given and innovation introduced into the education process that makes it compelling. I mean, I think now something like 70% of students are virtual or in a hybrid setting. That's an alarming number. So it's somehow that education K through 12, our equivalent of K through 12, I think needs to be rethought, because if we don't have that, then we won't have the infrastructure to bring the human capital along that we'll need.
Did you want me to comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, so digital is a funny thing. Ukraine has natural advantages in digital that are known and unknown. So let me give you a simple example. If we have lighthouse examples in Ukraine, even in Ukraine, they don't know about them. The weakness of the sector in technology is poor communications. I attribute it to the term Moja chata z kraju. And I know in my own travels in Ukraine, mostly in companies in this sector as well as the universities, the communications and sharing of information needs to increase, number one. Number two, they're terrible at marketing, just awful, the worst of the worst, because a technological society that they come out of just doesn't, they consider it chvaletiще, to brag, as opposed to promoting. And I think that change is necessary. There are some amazing breakthroughs that I have seen and worked with and implemented in, I'll call them Western companies, a number of them, that are breakthroughs and game changing. The difference being, I had to promote them. I had to push for them. And those, Ukraine has the ingredients, but without the right recipe, you don't make borscht. And I take a lesson, having met Klopotenko, the master chef. He has developed recipes and a cookbook. We need a cookbook for technology. If we say Taras Shevchenko, CUSUR, where's the CUSUR for this sector? Because it's complex and there's a lot of moving pieces. And we have people like Oleksandr, right? And others. The motion is not going to get there. Any path doesn't get us there. It's focus, focus, focus. And yes, capital is required. But the human capital side of this sector, giving everything that's gone on, forget the war, everything that's gone on in the last 50 years, we need to learn from. So I think we have examples of that, but they're in pockets, and that has to come together. And I'm almost at the point of writing the book called UAI, because the Ukrainian short form in the web is UA. Just add Ukraine AI, because that's what it's all about. And AI is the current buzz. There'll be AI 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. But in the world we're in, software drives the world. And that software-driven world, if we put our minds to it, the Ukrainian sector with the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of enabled workers will make a difference.
Super, thank you. Thank you for our distinguished guests for speaking. We have about 10 minutes for questions from the audience. So when you are called on, just briefly state your name and address which panelist you're talking to. Thank you.
Artist Kizik, OMK Associates, proud Ukrainian, former Wall Street executive. From an investor's perspective, when an investor is going to write a check for 10, 20, 50, or 100 million, and you're investing into a software company, it's all about future return, and that's correlated directly to the ownership of intellectual property. Without the ownership of intellectual property, the investment is useless. It doesn't work. And so what we did on Wall Street in the 90s was we developed the derivatives business by placing programmers with the traders real time, which is exactly what's happening now in Ukraine in the front lines. So what happened yesterday is already old news because today something else has changed. Having looked at several deals in Ukraine, we could not invest because there was intellectual property conflicts. And two, the ownership restrictions that the government has placed on outside ownership is not conducive to the investment environment. There are many companies that want to invest into military defense in Ukraine, but they can't. So how do you address that? Thank you.
Loaded question, I know. Well, I can try. Thank you, Orest. So, yeah, first, government backup of your investment, pretty much insurance. I know that there is a business advisory committee represented from Canada, for instance, by Roman Dubchak is working on the 3 layers of insurance for these type of deals. And eventually, I guess that's going to work out. Second, definitely, Ukraine is relaxing the export control rules, but those are not really working yet. With the IP stuff, it's always a challenge, but basically, and it is really, as you said, the things are changing so fast that it doesn't make sense to basically produce the hardware and put it on the shelves. All what you need licenses, and I think that is probably in most cases not, and that probably makes it easier. Plus, of course, the derivatives market, and really, as it was mentioned in the previous panels, the governments backing up those type of deals and making sure that those are going to be worked out. But that's a really challenging environment. Ukraine was not ready for these type of innovations in terms of commercializing those and working with partners. They're learning as we speak and paying lives for really being successful. So I still believe it's possible, but we have so many obstacles that I would really start more even and that's what we are doing, advocating for the government funding first, and only after that look for private investments. Thank you.
Ariel Cohen, the Atlantic Council. The discussion of Ukrainians being poor marketers applies to Ukraine, but it also applies to many other tech companies that are focusing on tech. I'll give you an example of Germans, actually. German companies mostly run by engineers and not by business people or engineers who graduate to be business people. But marketing your technology is important. I would argue that the rest of the world doesn't even realize that within a couple of years, a revolution happened in the drone and drone integration business, and Ukraine became a global leader in that. If you go back to the Karabakh Wars, it was Bayraktar that was celebrated, right? And I remember in early 1980s, my first articles that I wrote and published were about an Israeli drone called the Scout. And this was a very simple machine with a television camera on it. It wasn't armed. So what I'm trying to say is that building the brand of Ukrainian technology in general, military technology, but particularly in the drone and drone system integration affair, becomes an imperative now to position Ukraine and Ukrainian drone industry as a global market leader. My company, International Market Analysis, has been working on things like that for decades. We worked on Lockheed Martin 6th generation fighter. We worked on Hewlett-Packard and other systems. So if you have any questions, please see me after this session.
Can I answer briefly to this question? Sort of stuff. Yeah, but very briefly, it's of course related to human capital. And let me just give you two examples how Ukraine is working on such campaigns, and of course partnering with companies like yours on basically promoting Ukraine as a brand of defense tech is very important. So first, Dignitas Fund, which is just a spin-off, or in the past of the RADM for Ukraine, they are running the management of the defense tech programs with hundreds of Ukrainians being involved and basically learning how to manage those projects, how to sell those abroad. That's the marketing stuff. And second, really human capital education. So there are a number of programs in Ukraine. I just give you an example of the ones. I happen to be the founding director of the AI in Business master program at American University Kyiv, where we are really basically talking about two sides: tech, AI from one side, and business management of those type of projects. How do you sell in the simplified way of how to make business out of AI, which is a very challenging field by itself. So it's going, Ukraine is learning its lessons, but we need to step out and help them with campaigns. Thank you.
Well, actually, Dr. Romanko, you actually took part of my question away. And that is both you and Yuri and Eugene can probably answer this. The university system in Ukraine, I remember being there in 2009, the university system in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, 16, 17, 18, 19, institutions of higher learning in science, in physics, mathematics, science, cybernetics, and so on and so forth. That campus, Polytechnic campus, is as big, if not bigger than MIT. And I've seen the Gagarin, capsules and the Titov capsules. Kalishnikov did his guns there. That kind of firepower education. Have you folks seen the universities? Has the government made any effort? It'd be a good topic for a conference. Made an effort to bring all that firepower. It's still there because they're not serving in the army. So has that been integrated in the kind of things that you, especially in the high-tech field, are doing? Have you felt? I know you started. Does everybody else feel? Okay. Sorry about the long-winded question, but I thought it was important.
So that was the right question. Confirm.
Yeah, right.
I'll go next.
Okay. Yeah, I can. That's a very good question. I can speak to two examples. We the foundation run a STEM program in Ternopil with the Western in translation Western Ukraine National University, and that the model for that program is all based on the hypothesis that every student is at least hybrid and most likely virtual. So how do you deliver STEM education, STEM principles in that kind of environment where you don't have the advantage of a laboratory or a collaborative space or what have you? So the interaction there has been great. I think we've taken a regional approach. We've tried. This maybe gets to your point, Blotko. We've tried to take that model and roll it out across the country, and it's met with some resistance. Some of it's funding, some of it's territorial. But I found that experience in terms of being able to deliver that level of education with those educators that have been there, have not been typically activated, has been pretty positive. Now, if I switch that to the startups that we've worked with, and even some of the graduate students, my experience has been it's been much more autonomous, meaning that it's we've been able to align with a dedicated student that doesn't have barriers in terms of being able to innovate or even collaborate, but doesn't necessarily get the institutional support that he or she may get, in the US, for example, for something similar.
Again, sorry that I'm interjecting every question and answering, but yeah, yeah, I happen to be involved in the academic life in Ukraine, in addition to being a adjunct professor at University of Toronto. So basically, there are private universities in Ukraine that really nail it down. Ukrainian Catholic University, Kyiv School of Economics, American University Kyiv, they are all opening the programs like aerospace engineering, AI at the intersection with business, drones, stuff like that. So it's going there. It depends how much they can raise funding, but it's going. Like some universities like UKU, they already have the endowment funds. For instance, Kyiv School of Economics is getting there. With public universities, it's much more big in terms of, it really depends on the leadership. So talking to some of the universities, I had a call recently with Ksenia Semyonova, the newly appointed director of the Kyiv Aviation University. They're trying really hard, and she is building a great team. Of course, they have the restrictions being the public university. Other universities like Kyiv Polytechnic are much more big in terms of their management and leadership, but potentially they can get there. There are still government restrictions and regulations that are really restrictive on the public universities. They are trying to change that. It's going there. Students are amazing, very proactive, like basically level of English is perfect. And a couple of points that I would like to add, what we are trying to do in Canada. So we have the MyTech's research internship program. We had more than 1,000 Ukrainian interns in Canada doing research internships at Canadian companies, Canadian universities, now fully funded by the government of Canada. And that's really a huge support for building the human capital. And those are research internships with the idea of commercializing applied research. Second, we have this idea that I mentioned last time in Washington. So we are dreaming about the University of Toronto Center in Ukraine. So far, none of the top 200 universities is present in Ukraine with their own brand. Even us, like Arizona State University, that we are partnering with American University Kyiv, is present as American University Kyiv, not as Arizona State University brand. So that's our dream, to have the university UFT, which is top 20 worldwide. If you're talking about AI field, top 3, especially after the Nobel Prize of Jeffrey Hinton. We want to have their presence in Ukraine, this its own brand for joint research, for student exchanges, for internships and stuff like that. That's a dream, and I would like to propose you that you advocate for MIT or Stanford or Columbia or Harvard to be present in Ukraine. It's a very hard task. I do not believe in that, but it doesn't matter that I don't believe. We still need to try. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christina Johan, and I'm here with the Ukrainian-American Youth Civics Club. So you mentioned like making AI that has like strategic capabilities. So my question is, how do you even teach AI to be able to do this? And then like, once we do develop an AI that can have strategic capabilities, how do you like manage it? Since right now we already have like limited resources, especially since it takes a lot of water to cool current AI systems.
Okay, maybe somebody else will try to start, or should I? Okay, sorry, very, very briefly. So far, AI is doing good, is able to do things that we as humans are able to do. So we can recognize objects on the images, we can write a good piece of text, some of us can paint or produce a good design, but we are not good as humans making strategic decisions. Even simple stuff, even if there are two people are involved, whom to divorce, whom to marry. We are not good at making even those decisions, not talking about planning the war in Iran or something much more complex. And that's where AI is not there. I'm not sure if AI is going to be there when when there is a high level of uncertainty that those can be human feelings, those will be the fog of war, those can be many, many other items. AI so far is great in aggregating all information that we have and basically doing what as humans we are able to do really fast. Recognize objects, write a piece of text or generate an image. For strategic decisions, I'm not sure that we are going to be there. Like, nobody can predict the future. That's the answer, but we are trying. So to solve more and more complex tasks. And so far, all these AI agents, ecosystem of agents that everybody's building, they are building those at SS&C Technologies as well, will be a great supporters for decision making. Supporters, not decision makers, at least not yet. Thank you.
Let me take a run at that as well to help the conversation. We look at AI the way the software world has evolved. Ukraine has advantages in building bots. And I contend that the future is bot-tastic, because bots are going to rule the world, whether it's a drone, whether it's a piece of software, whether it's an analysis engine. And we can export that. And the bot elements in that bot-tastic world requires bot tactics. I made that word up. What are the tactics? And I think the gap goes back to the question about marketing. Ukraine has natural advantages, but we have to come together and figure it out. A good example is the Battelle Institute, which has a lab in Ukraine. Most people don't know it's there. It's from Ohio. Battelle was founded for a particular purpose. Okay, they co-developed, invented xerography and barcodes. Now, I'll leave a question for the room. I'm not going to give you the answer. Why is Battelle out of Ohio, north of Kyiv, in a place called Chernobyl? They've been there for many, many years, studying a very particular situation. It happens to be the 40th anniversary of that disaster. But the Battelle Institute is a good example of involvement, near-in involvement. Somebody at Battelle said, we can learn about the long-term effect of radiation on ecosystems. There's not a lot of places in the world you can do it, and they're there. But the Battelle Institute, if we had a dozen Battelle Institutes in Ukraine that bridge the gap between companies and universities and startups and existing companies, it's through that institutionalization of gain that these bots will emerge. Imagine if today we came up with an idea and invented a thing called a spreadsheet. How much money would we unlock? By the way, somebody did invent a spreadsheet, and it's in common use. So the bots that we see ahead of us, okay, coming from Ukraine, will create massive wealth for the country. AI is part of it, but it's much more than AI, as Dr. Romanko so correctly points out. Because bots, whether it's a machine, whether it's a piece of software, or whether it's something that a human uses, Ukraine needs to lead in the world and can. And I think that's where the rubber will hit the road.
Thank you all for attending our session, and we hope you enjoy the other panels after this.
Despite the crowd, coffee break until after the session. Sorry, folks. If you want to get a coffee, you can later on. But because we're about to follow up this session with a session. You can't hear me? Okay. My mic is on. We're about to follow this session with a session called Examining Ukraine's Revolution, Military Affairs, Advances and Breakthroughs. And the discussion leader, I'm going to be asking Herman. Herman is here. Oh, Herman. Miss Irina is here. Yes. Thank you. And Admiral is on. Vysotsky, well, Mark is on. So Admiral is on. This herd is a tough herd. Okay. Herman, actually, yeah. Well, yeah, no, it's okay. I'll give them one minute and then I'll get really angry. I'll shut off all the cameras outside. Our disadvantage in this wonderful place is that everywhere there's a screen, so you can hear this entire conference and the entire complex, and that's what a lot of people are doing. But anyway, I'm going to move very quickly onto this panel because this panel identifies what may in fact be the cutting edge of all cutting edges in Ukraine, and that's the defense industry. And so with that, Herman, and actually what I would ask, if you're staying in the room, to make no noise if you're staying in the room. I can only say that the discussion leader, Herman Pirchner, aside from being one of the finest partners you could possibly have in our venture in the last 25 years of doing this, is a master of Washington. You can see it. You can see it in the pictures he has at the AFPC. He has met just about every world leader you can imagine. He's been watching Ukraine from the very beginning. You can see it in at the AFPC. And I think this thing, Herman, I really wanted you to do this one because I think you can actually, you in this panel can give us real insight to this thing that's going on in Ukraine, which is really interesting. This defense industry of ours. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Walter. It's been a pleasure to be associated with you all these years. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever been at any of your conferences where I didn't go away being a little bit smarter. Yeah, we like to listen to what's being said. And before introducing our panelists, I'll maybe pick up on a theme that was raised a little bit in the last panel. I think we've learned from the last panel and this coming panel and others about the excellence of Ukrainian technology and warfighting systems, not just the hardware, but the systems. 100 years ago, if you read business magazines, you would know the theory that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will come to your door. And that isn't exactly fitting today's society. Ukraine has built the proverbial better mousetrap, and technical experts in different parts of the world are understanding that. But to reach the goal, having that technology give maximum defense capability to the US and the West to build industries requires something beyond just having the best technology. You, of course, have to educate and market those that are technical experts within the institutions that will provide the funding, if it's government or private. But beyond that, you have to understand how those institutions work. Big institutions especially are very, very reluctant to change. I think in the case of US history, the fight of General Billy Mitchell after World War I to convince the War Department that aircraft was going to be central to the next war the United States had to face. And he lost that battle. It was court-martialed. Eventually, of course, he was proven right. Sometimes these battles for old technologies are defeated. There was a big effort to expand the size of our cavalry going into World War II. That was cut off only at the level of General Marshall. That's the top guy. Today, you have expanded defense spending in Germany. And where is so much of it going? To tanks? Are tanks a good use of money today, given drone technology? No. But if somebody's in an institution and they've spent their life as a tanker or a cavalry person, that's what you know, and you want to expand, and you're going to fight like hell to keep it from changing. So there's resistance to new technologies. And the way to get by that is a question of political will, which means talking to those that are in power. But that in itself is a problem. I think of the days when I was in the US Senate and companies would come to get funding for their particular project. You would hear why this plane, which was outdated, is still needed. And then you would say, And Senator, you understand that in your hometown, there is a factory with 1,200 jobs that helps manufacture this. So this is how votes are put together. And it's necessary to introduce Ukrainian technology to help better defend the US and other parts of the world, and to build industries to gain a mastery of how that system works. Or else the simple excellence of the technology will take much longer to rise to the surface. So I've used up my moderator's time, and I think we'll go immediately to Irina, who has for over 20 years worked on the question of legal requirements to do business in Ukraine and technology, and I think is known probably to everybody in the room. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Please allow me just a few words about the organization I represent. Yes, excuse me. Just a few words about the organization I represent. It's a US-Ukraine Business Council. This is a US-based nonprofit business and trade association, which unifies US private sector mostly, but also prominent Ukrainian companies, European and Canadian companies. We have more than 240 members representing all key sectors of economy. But I would say that our biggest and fastest growing segment is defense. And in the defense security segment, we have every branch of defense industry. We have OEM primes, we have defense tech, logistics services, demining, you name it. So a lot of our work is actually focused on defense. And I just want to talk about key trends that we are observing in Ukraine's defense sector. And that's very much reflects what the previous panel was talking about, because definitely Ukraine is showing the new warfare, electronic warfare to the world. And when you were talking about resistance to change or reluctance to change, there is a lot of like hiding head in the sand situation that we're observing in the US, in Europe. I have been to a lot of defense and defense tech conferences, both in the United States and in Europe. And what speakers are talking about there is futuristic plans, something that will happen in the distant future. Actually, in Ukraine, it's happening today. And those plans or those ideas, in Ukraine, they have been already implemented, deployed, tested, retested, redeployed. So the cycle that we are observing in Ukraine is really lightning speed of everything that's going on. And I would say the main trend that we are observing in Ukraine, this is innovation, data-driven approach, and the fastest cycle of innovation. This trend was amplified when the former Vice Prime Minister in charge of digitalization, Mikhailo Fyodorov, was appointed Minister of Defense, and just 3 months ago. And he brought with him to the Ministry of Defense a group of young innovators. And under this new leadership, they embraced the electronic warfare, and they're moving forward with astonishing speed and efficiency. We have been observing in the past that a lot of innovation was happening in Ukraine at the unit levels, and then it was sort of bubbling up, and then it was stopped somewhere in the middle or at the top. Now it happens at the unit level, it happens at the top level, and everywhere in between. So we see a lot of like harmonization of innovation. These trends, they have enormous effect on the battlefield. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was reported that for the first time in wartime history, Ukrainian forces captured Russian positions solely with unmanned systems, and just drones and robotics, and without participation of any soldiers, infantry, and without losses on Ukrainian side. And it was also reported that by now, Ukrainian ground robotic systems completed over 22,000 missions. At conferences in US, in Europe, I was in Wiesbaden just 2 weeks ago at a defense conference. We are hearing that there is very little defense tech existing in Europe, very little defense tech in the United States. And actually, my first reaction was when the speaker said that there is no defense tech in Europe. I said, there is, it's in Ukraine. That's where defense tech is. But I just want to say that from my observation of European governments, European Union level, and especially several more advanced European countries like Germany, like Nordics, they are actually embracing this trend. 2 weeks ago, when I was in Wiesbaden, at the same time, President Zelensky, Minister Fedorov were meeting with Chancellor Merz and with German Minister of Defense. And at that moment, they announced several billions worth of investment into Ukrainian defense tech. That's just Germany. We are not talking about EU level. We are not talking about Nordics. So Europeans actually are much more active from what we are seeing than the United States in this. I want to talk a little bit about co-production, R&D, testing, and sustainment. Co-production mostly happens in Europe right now. Under the umbrella of Build with Ukraine program and other programs, Quantum System, which is a US-UBC member, their German main company in partnership with Ukrainian Frontline Robotics has launched the German-Ukrainian joint venture. They started producing drones in Germany. Everyone heard about Ukrainian interceptor drone Octopus, which is now being produced in the UK and in other parts of Europe. And part of the reason why Ukrainian companies are so eager to co-produce in Europe is, on one hand, they get funding, they get a lot of support, a lot of political will. Somebody was talking about political will. There is definitely a political will in some of the European governments. But also the other part is severe regime of export restrictions in Ukraine. Companies have significant extra capacity in Ukraine, and they don't know what to do with it. They cannot export this capacity, and the government, Ukrainian government, is not buying all their production. So they're sitting basically on their products, which they cannot sell in Ukraine or export. But they need export to survive financially, to scale, and to attract investments. So this is one of the reasons why Ukrainian companies really want to co-produce in Europe. They want to co-produce in the United States, and since the last couple of months in the Middle East. Ukraine's leadership made several announcements that they are planning to relax those export restrictions. We haven't seen that happening yet, really on any meaningful level. It was also announced that Ukraine will open 10 export centers outside of Ukraine in European countries. We haven't heard about export center opening in the United States. Probably will be opened in Middle East, considering the latest developments. But it would be great if they would open export center in the United States as well. There were also reports that Ukraine has signed 10-year contracts with Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, also about defense tech, co-production, and export. Apart from co-production outside of Ukraine, there are also ample opportunities to co-produce inside Ukraine. Not only co-production, but R&D, testing, training, sustainment, etc. Ukraine adopted the special defense city legal regime, which provides for a lot of benefits for those who will be investing in co-production inside Ukraine. But it's a vicious circle again. You invest and produce inside Ukraine, and then you cannot export your products, so you cannot really make money, basically. And that's what I've heard today, many of the commentators talking about, that in order for any venture capital fund, any strategic investor to go in, they need to understand how to make money in Ukraine. And until the export restriction situation is resolved, this will not be happening. I also want to say a few words about Ukrainian counterparties. We are private sector association, so our members in the defense tech, when they want to go into Ukrainian market, they ask us who are our counterparties with whom we should be working. Obviously, private sector, it's understandable, private sector to private sector. But before you find your private sector partner, who are the sort of unifiers, where the information comes from, who is in charge of procurement? So on the government side, the main counterparties are the Ministry of Defense. And inside the Ministry of Defense, there is DPA, Defense Procurement Agency, which as of this year combined the two separate branches into one, lethal and non-lethal. So this is now one single entity. There are several state agencies which are not immediately obvious, but which do a lot in terms of testing, working on R&D, etc. So one of them is State Special Transportation Service of Ukraine, then State Service of Special Communications and Information Protection, State Research Institute for Testing and Certification of Military Equipment, a very, very important institutions that our members have never heard about. So we as association, we work very closely with those institutions to make sure that our members, when they need this capacity, they go and talk to these people. Of course, you have Ukroboronprom, which is a giant state-owned holding company, and the whole bunch of companies under Ukroboronprom. And our favorite is Brave One. This is intergovernmental cluster in defense tech. So we always recommend to work with them. We supported their roadshow in March. And then there are all kinds of associations. And I know that I'm running out of time, but I just want to mention two more very, very important counterparties. One is military units. In Ukraine, military units play a non-traditional role. They have their own R&D centers, they have their own budgets, they have their own procurement, and the other are Ukrainian charitable foundations, also non-traditional role. Come Back Alive, Pritula Foundation, they are in fact a huge procurement agencies. So these are your counterparties. That's what we tell our members. Our members are very excited about working with Ukraine, but of course, the roadblocks remain, and part of it is resistance. Thank you.
Now we'll go to Serhiy Vysotsky, who I understand we have electronically with us. He is Deputy Chairman of the National Association of Ukraine Defense Industries. Prior to that, he'd been the host of a very popular talk show in Ukraine and served in the RADA as a Deputy Chairman of a committee. And the floor is yours, Serhiy.
Thank you. Are you hearing me loud and clear? Yeah, thanks. Good. Yeah, thank you. My host career was way before the full-scale invasion. Thank you. Great to seeing all you here. Herman, thank you for the introduction. So, just to be clear, it's evening here. So, Herman, please can you specify what should I this now and what issues went not covered during the conference? Because you started a couple hours ago, but it's nighttime in Kyiv and a lot of work going on. So please, what do you expect and what do you want to hear from me on the related issues, drone-related issues, and other issues that you are speaking of today?
You know best what's in your head, so you should tell us what you think we need to know.
Well, thank you, Herman. I would say that for the interesting what Irina told everyone from the standpoint of the Ukrainian industry, like to follow up on her words and to say that she is 100% correct. And so we are very deliberately, and very active. We pressed all arguments towards our government and public that will encourage our government to leave for experts of the military goods from Ukraine, and of course, drones is a huge part of this deal, of this issue. I think that during these times, Ukraine can be a partner for promoting not only the product but the solution. So we all, despite all the political difficulties and the political issues that we have now between Ukraine and largely the European Union with the United States, of course, we understand that people of the United States and overall the government of the United States is supporting Ukraine. And the support continues, maybe in some another forms that it was previously, but of course the Pearl Initiative and the ability of Ukrainian companies to participate in the Pentagon drone programs is very important for us. But I would say that one of the ways of how we can mm, return the support that you were providing, and of course for more contribution of the Ukrainian solutions to the United States and of course the European security environment. When I'm speaking on these issues with some capitals, Washington D.C. or the European capitals, I say that Ukraine value the position, not the hardware itself. It's not a big deal to have an FPV drone assembled in one country responsible. And we all know the part, we all know the framework. It's nothing serious. Our contribution and the most important that we can offer is the combat application, the tactics, and how do you actually integrate those various types of solutions, US, CUS, like jammers, radioelectronic reconnaissance. All this means that are being operated by our military personnel on the front line to your framework of defense strategy, your framework of defense forces. I think that Ukraine force can offer the understanding of scalability, and the way and I would say like the way, the methodology of how you actually interact inside the defense industrial slash defense environment in order to have the scale of innovation and new solutions integrated in your platforms, and how these solutions integrated in the overall layout of the defense forces for now in Ukraine is the front line. Yeah, so in the actual situation. I think this knowledge that we have it's very important for the scope of global security and for the United States national security. Of course, we have our obstacle right now, and these statements from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that the export might be allowed. And when we're speaking about exports, we're not only speaking about the exports of the final product. So it's not the hardware itself; it's the export of IT, the technology. It's the export of licensing. So license what we have to produce it on the United States soil. Because one large part of this process is not only the hardware itself, but it's the software solutions, of course. And I would say that it's the most important solutions that we have now, because they are involving in the space of the moving combat. So it's a way with allowance, if these procedures will be allowed and somehow lifted under the framework of the security agreements that we have between our states, the United States have this kind of agreement with Ukraine. It will allow Ukrainian industry to contribute more for the sake of the national security of the United States or European countries. And of course, I view the proliferation of Ukrainian solutions to those countries as the greatest way of supporting Ukrainian political goals. That's why Ukraine matter for the United States, because Ukraine and Ukrainian defense industry on the B2B, even on B2B level, which is, I think, more the way that is more understandable for the current administration. You know, the business to business, the profits, the gain can contribute a lot to what we try to achieve politically. Because if the Ukraine and its industry is important for the sake of the US national security, European states national security, that's like one of the part of the answers in the formula why you have keep the support of Ukraine. And so right now, of course, we see the instance from the Department of War, but encourage us to look into the United States as a global partner for activities. We see that the drone dominance program and the part of the Spy Foundry program, though it wasn't conducted so great, perfect as drone dominance, and the encouragement of Ukrainian companies to take part in those programs is high importance for our understanding that we can matter, we can be of matter for the United States. We've seen the recent budget proposals from the Department of War with the great extension of the drone COS programs times 10 times 20 comparing to the last year budget. And I would say that, of course, the partnership with the US companies, if we will imagine that this deal with export, it will be somehow solved in the nearest future. As I said, we are very encouraged by the recent statements of President Volodymyr Zelensky. And of course, we view the US defense industrial partners as that can help us to access those programs, that can partner with us to produce product on the United States soil. We see ourselves as one of the priorities for our activities. And believe me, I truly believe that we need each other. The United States needs our understanding of the modern large-scale, very intensive in the terms of drone warfare and electronic jamming, counter-jamming warfare solutions. I think that we have something to beat the United States. And of course, Ukrainian companies view United States as one of the greatest markets for its future development in your country. So if maybe we'll have some additional questions, but overall, I will highly encourage you to continue this engagement. Herman, you were here in the mission last time, so I was very glad to see you in Kyiv, as always, and to see that we still have the true believers for the US-Ukrainian cooperation in Washington, D.C. And that's right to achieve these common goals for the sake and for the good of the United States national defense and security and for Ukrainian national defense force. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I'm here. I'm here.
Our final speaker in the panel will be Admiral Mark Montgomery. Do we have him electronically?
Yes, sir, you do. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but there you are. I can see you too. So the Admiral is the Senior Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies Center on Cyber and Technological Innovation. He previously served as Policy Director of the Senate Armed Services Committee, which probably aided him greatly in one of his projects was to implement the recommendations of a congressionally mandated commission. That's always a tough job. Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Great previous speakers. I'm honored to be with all of you. I'm going to talk a little bit about where I see the advances occurring in the Ukrainian defense industrial base, why I think it happened, and then maybe some problems that Ukraine's going to have to think about broadly in their not the defense industrial base, but in their defense organization. So look, there's a few tools that have been particularly well managed. I think Ukraine has done a unique job in battle management tools. They've taken some things from the United States, but they developed many on their own. And that's because Ukraine understood early that more data is good data. And what I mean by that is they were willing to take unclassified systems and bring them into the situational awareness environment and have them help inform either their classified programs, but more likely just their battle space awareness. As a result, they took acoustic detectors, visual detectors, and were able to very early on begin to paint the battle space, particularly of Shahed and later Jaran drones launched by Russia. And then engage them, and that way they could position their forces to properly engage them, which is doable, very doable in the kind of speed of warfare that the Shahed and Jaran 2 drones were, which is moving about 140 knots. So they could sense something 15, 20 kilometers away, get word to gunners, get them in position so they could take the shot, and as counter drone interceptors developed, get words to them as well. So their battle space management tools well in advance of the United States. In fact, it's to such a degree that the United States has now observed that, and U.S. Army Europe copied it and is running their own unclassified sensor cloud that informs weapon systems employment. Unfortunately for the United States, they failed to see the wisdom of it and get it to the Middle East, and as a result, they didn't have it there, and now the Ukrainians have brought Skynet down into the Middle East. But the U.S. Army Europe commander was brought down, his chief technologist himself, to help implement it because he had a good understanding. He observed what Ukraine was doing, recognized it was the best possible practice for battle management, and did it. That goes hand in hand with the unmanned vehicles. And I'm sure over the day here, there's been a lot of discussion of it, but it goes without saying that there's been, dramatic, adaptive warfare application in UAVs, whether they're air, ground, or surface. As a Navy admiral, I like to say that the Ukrainian Navy in 2023 had the best year a Navy's ever had, in this century, without ever having a ship get underway for one day. And that's a pretty impressive achievement. And the U.S. is beginning to learn from the USV and the UAV and the UAV and UGV, but we were so late on the battle management tools, and as a result, we incurred significant casualties during the war with Iran, where 8 people were killed in an ops center, and several aircraft were damaged and several radars were damaged by Shahed drones that should have been easily engaged had the United States taken up the Ukrainian offer for interceptor drones and battle management tools like Skynet. And then, kind of famously, President Trump was offered these by President Zelensky in the summer of 2025, and he said, "We don't need what Ukraine has." And the president was, as he is on many issues, very wrong. So, to me, those are the 2 biggest tools that I've seen develop here. And the question is, how did Ukraine get so good at this? And the first is they changed the rules of procurement. And I'll talk later on about Ukrainian procurement still needs a lot of work, but in a different way. They changed the rules of procurement. They had an operator-driven defense industrial base. By placing the drone battalions within brigades, within corps on the front line, a percentage of the drones are built in very close proximity to the operators who are going to use them, and therefore operator feedback is aggressive. Now, those are mostly on one-way attack drones, but you do see some of the same things when you step back from the front and you get to the brigade at the nemesis level or farther back, the general staff level, where there's still a lot of feedback from the operator, much more so in the United States. In the United States, there's almost no operator feedback in a meaningful way into the development of tools. And it's just so impressive to watch the Ukrainians do that. So that operator-driven feedback into the defense industrial base is really the number one change rule procurement. The second one I'd say is the software-driven nature of it. Look, some of these are hardware changes. I get it, particularly as Ukraine tries its hardest to get off a Chinese DJI. I think most people in the room understand Ukraine is fighting four countries. We know that: Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China. China doing some of the most damage possible to Ukraine by providing microelectronics for hypersonic, ballistic, and cruise missiles, and backstopping the Russian economy, which you can't put a price on. I mean, Russia is not able to continue this fight without China's support. On the other hand, China is very nefariously allowing DJI drones to get delivered to Ukraine. And while Ukraine may have started with 90% of their one-way attack drones being DJI, they've driven that number down to under 40%. But what that is China bleeding Russia dry. You know, we all know China is the number one beneficiary of the Russia-Ukraine war. That China's goal is for Russia to be bled dry, Europe to be consumed, and America to be distracted and disappointed. And they're getting all of those effects. But that's the hardware side. On the software side, it's been so impressive what the Ukrainian operators have been able to do with software changes literally every month. You know, there's a significant change in how the drone operates, how its electronic warfare and jamming systems work. And there's also hardware changes with that, but it's very unique that they have both of those going in a very fast generational change, the software even faster than the hardware. Now, uniquely, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. does do this, but only in one area, in a system we have called Aegis on a Navy ship. And I've watched it. You know, when I was a ship captain, my Aegis system was updated once a year. When I was an admiral, my ships were updated once every 3 months. My son's on one of these ships now as a junior officer, and he says it's updated every 3 to 5 days. That's software engineering. That is a software engineered warfighting capability. The United States Navy's got that from their experience in the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb fighting the Houthis, and in the Arabian Gulf fighting the Iranians. We do that on one system. The Ukrainians are doing that on nearly every unmanned system they have every few days, every week. It's just so impressive. So to me, after the operator-driven defense industrial base, the second big advantage they have is their software-driven changes. And the third one is they've solved the capacity challenge. Like if I go to Taiwan right now, they'll tell me, hey, I can build a red-free drone. And what that means is a CCP, a Chinese Communist Party, supply chain free drone. The problem is that their country right now in peacetime needs, 500 units a month, maybe 1,000 units a month. In wartime, they'll need, 50,000 units a month. Well, that's a capacity delta that they can't figure out without getting a customer database like from the United States and others. Ironically, Ukraine solved this capacity challenge issue by, building a million, between mostly on one-way attack, some high level, hundreds of thousands of drones a month, but then shooting 100,000 drones a month at the Russians. So that capacity challenge, they've solved it, but they've solved it for a wartime condition. As we shift to peacetime, and you can see that some of the really high quality Ukrainian defense industrial base coming online, the military only needs 50 or 60% of their production. The rest of their production lines are in stasis because they're not allowed to sell the weapons, and generally, there's a few exceptions to that. They're allowed to sell the weapons, but they don't want to produce in excess of what's needed by the government, by the military. So those three things, operator-driven, defense industrial base, software-driven transformational issues, and the ability to solve the capacity, those are three big reasons why Ukraine's been so successful. Now, let me talk about some weaknesses. And look, I say this in the context of I spend a lot of time training and supporting Ukraine. I believe in Ukraine. I know Ukraine won't lose the war. But there's some stuff that needs to be fixed. And I would tell you first among them, and this is to be fixed, I mean, to enter NATO. There's a day, I think 3 years and a couple months from now, there's going to be an open door to NATO. Now, when I was a one-star admiral, one of my jobs was to get countries through member accession programs. I worked 5 or 6 countries on that. My experience was that SSRs, former Soviet Socialist Republics, took 7 to 9 years. Former Warsaw Pact countries took 5 to 7 years. Former Yugoslavian countries took 5 to 7 years. I think Ukraine looks at like Sweden and Finland and says, this takes months. But alas, in the member access program, there are some things you have to accomplish. Ironically, the hardest one is conducting full-scale like infantry maneuver warfare. Ukraine is check that block 100 times over. They're fantastic. The other ones are all the boring ones. It's having a human relations and a promotion system that's transparent, rules-based, anonymous. Like the West does it, not like the Soviet Union did it. Having a recruiting system that is not an impressment system, but it's one that legally ropes people in, like the West does it, not like the Soviet Union did it. I could go on as education, military justice, procurement. All of these systems inside the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, to some degree or another, not all are in terrible shape, but to some degree or another, they retain some of their ligature from the Soviet times. And that needs to be let go of. And a lot of what the member accession program was support to get that done. And in fact, there's financing and resourcing to do it. Right now, if I were Ukraine, knowing that I'm 3 years away from a pretty good, what I think will likely be a good offer, and I don't want to wait 7 to 9 years to get it done. And Ukraine does everything faster than you should be able to. They're fantastic. But they're going to really need to get to work on this. So in my mind, working HR, human relations, management, personnel management, recruiting, education, justice, that's military justice, and procurement, beginning to modernize those systems, shifting them from kind of Soviet ligature to Western aligned is a very important task and one that the defense base, the military really needs to tackle now. So those are recommendations. Again, I say this in the context of Ukraine is going to win this war. Let me say that differently. I don't believe Ukraine can lose this war. I don't know how they regain Crimea or capture territory, but I know they're not going to lose. They've shown the military and civilian societal resilience to do that. But I just leave you those things as things I'd want to fix if I want to enter NATO rapidly when the time comes. I'll pass it back to you. Thank you very much.
Admiral, I'll put the first question to you. How is the U.S. Navy assessing Ukraine's use of sea drones, and how does that affect their thinking regarding future procurement for the U.S.?
So 2 different questions, the good ones. How it affects us. Look, it definitely is going to affect how the United States operates within 500 miles of the littorals, or maybe 700 kilometers, I don't know, somewhere there, 400 to 500 miles of the littorals. We're going to have to be more careful. We're going to have to maintain armed helos and attack aircraft up and ready to strike those, because ships struggle. You can see that when the drones attack even Russian patrol frigates. They have trouble getting their gun in a good angle to shoot at the drones. larger surface ships had the same problem. So you really need those aviation escorts to help with that. So first, it'll affect, how we operate in close proximity to land, and I think it'll limit some of it. But also, it's an opportunity for us. It's weapons we can get that can make a difference in the Taiwan Straits. We have a concept of something called hellscape. When I look at the Taiwan War, there's a East Coast, West Coast dynamic to it. The West Coast facing towards China, that's a hellscape. That's like what Ukraine has going on, but at sea. In other words, with the kind of weapons the Ukrainian Navy and intelligence services use, the USVs, but in the quantities that you see ashore, much higher numbers out at sea at once, doing strikes, several thousand Chinese weapons inbound or Chinese small boats inbound, and Taiwan-American ones going out. Now, east of Taiwan, 400 or 500 miles to 2,000 miles out, is a much more traditional kind of fight, what we call air-sea battle. So we have to be ready for both. But what we've seen by the dramatic performance of Ukrainian unmanned surface vessels, it's a lesson to us of a lot of work we need to get done.
Questions?
Thank you, Oleksandr Romanko. Admiral Montgomery, first, I would like to thank you for mentioning the Ukrainian marketplace known as a dot chain, where the military units can order and procure their equipment. Especially, they can procure additional equipment for getting points for hitting the Russian stuff and equipment, which is got known as electronic bally, or you can make the acronym yourself in Ukrainian, e-bally. But my question will be mostly for Irina and Serhiy. So Irina, you mentioned the road trip of the Brave One in the US, and unfortunately we decided not to come to Canada. But what we are trying to do, we are trying to advocate for the venture capital fund from the government of Canada of 50 million into the Ukrainian defense tech startups by signing an MOU with Brave One, such as the Europeans did with the Brave Tech EU technology. Did you have such conversations either in the US or in Ukraine? And is it the best way to go, and how we can continue advocating for really having the venture capital funds for Ukraine defense tech startup from the US and from Canada? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. We're a private sector association, so this is a conversation that Brave One has to have with Pentagon or with the US government, not with us. We're supporting them at our level. But unfortunately, I haven't heard about such conversations. We know about Brave France, Brave Norway. These are bilateral intergovernmental conversations. So if something like this happens, we will be more than happy to support that. But that's not something that we can drive as a private sector association.
Serhiy, do you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to refer what Irina said. So I would say that I had some talks with the. I'm not qualified to speak on the venture capital and some financial instruments of how to approach the defense. I would say that for Ukraine, so what I'm always saying to some international partners or businesses, California style people that we want to invest. But the overall Ukrainian defense industrial space doesn't need investments. We have plenty of our own financial means and financial instruments for the self-financing. We need procurement, so we need actually to sell what we are making or some joint solutions to whoever will pay. Overall, I would say that I had a couple of engagements with the Canadian counterparts for the last year. I think that for the last year, it was more the engagements with the Canadian side was more active than during the previous years. I think that we understand the political emphasis why it happened. But I would tend to agree with Irina that should be supported by the government. I would say that out of many NATO member countries, embassies here and the attaches, defense attaches, the personnel dealing with the Ukrainian military industry on day-to-day level. I tend to say that the Canadians are one of the least active here in Ukraine. We don't see enough missions here. We don't see enough business present from the defense industrial space of Canada here. We don't see. So there are different kind of support, and we, of course, we're very grateful for Canadians for financial and defense support that they are providing. They're contributing to many programs. On some level, we see an active presence of liberal. It's on the recording. I try to be to choose my words. Not of very active support that not always public, I would say, from many countries of NATO, but we don't see any Canadian missions here, and this more precise support that is not talked about in the media on the conferences from the Canadian side. Though Canada have the special unit, very qualified special operation forces. But I would say that Europeans, and namely, I'm saying, of course, the countries.
We're running out of time, and I promised two other people to ask. So thank you. Here first and then second.
Thanks. Howard Schatz from RAND. Irina, has ITAR been any kind of barrier to U.S. companies cooperating with Ukraine? And then second question, if I may, Irina and Serhiy, what is the holdup with loosening export controls from Ukraine?
The first question, definitely yes. Lots of complaints from our members, and there were even bigger obstacles at some point. I think now they're solved. And your second question was, what's the problem with export from Ukraine?
What are the barriers to loosening?
I think it's political will, because the society knows there is a war going on. So the moment Ukrainian defense companies start exporting, the society will ask why it's not going to the front lines. They don't have enough. So I think it needs to be addressed at this sort of public level, public discussion level. But there is no time for this. It needs to be done yesterday.
Yuri Gorodnichenko. I have a question for Admiral Montgomery. The U.S. defense sector is extremely concentrated. The Ukrainian defense sector is much less concentrated. There is a hypothesis that the smaller concentration stimulates innovation, cost savings, and so on. I was wondering if you can comment on this hypothesis.
Yeah. So I agree that if that was the case, that's a fair analysis. One thing that's interesting is our procurement's concentrated. In other words, the top 6 companies get 99.3% of the procurement dollars, and 0.7 go to, the next 7 or 8 countries, companies like Anduril, Palantir, SpaceX. But underneath that's about 100. Our R&D money gets spread across 50 to 100 to now, with Golden Dome, 200 companies. So the idea factories, there's hundreds of them. There's only thousands of those companies, but hundreds that have active government R&D contracts. But what happens to those companies is they're purchased as they begin to develop something useful. They're purchased by the bigger companies. So it looks like you have a concentrated network. It starts in a distributed R&D, a distributed entrepreneurship, and then concentrates in a production. Now, look, part of that's good because it gets things done into a system, but it's bad because the system sucks and it's slow, and it's bad because if I'm Lockheed Martin and I buy your product that you were going to try, you developed a product for $10. You couldn't figure out how to scale it right, but you're pretty sure it'd still be $10 when you could scale it. Lockheed Martin will they'll buy it, figure out how to scale it, and then sell it for $50. So the government kind of loses on that. But in terms of R&D and thought process, it's pretty distributed. In terms of procurement, it's extremely, as you point out, 99.3% right now focused. So we need to fix that procurement part, but I think the R&D part is in the right spot.
Okay. Well, thanks so much to the panel, and we'll go to a coffee break, I believe.
Thank you.